Welcome back, everybody. I'm delighted you're joining us again for I'm Possible Live. If this is your first time, we're excited and delighted you're popping in. Love to welcome you, whether you're joining us live or for replays. And please let us know where you're from. We love to know where you're joining us from today. I'm delighted and excited to introduce our first guest and our returning guest, amazing Luiza. And I'd love for Luiza to introduce herself to you today. And then we're going to introduce our topic. But Luiza, welcome back.
Thank
And
you. Go ahead.
thank you so much. Welcome back.
Well, thank you for inviting me back. It's really a pleasure to come back and have conversations with you and others who are out there listening about a topic that I hold near and dear to my heart, which is inclusive leadership. For those of you who don't know me, I am Luiza Dreasher. I'm president and CEO of Mastering Cultural Differences. I work with HR executives and other leaders to help them create truly inclusive organizations.
Thank you so much, Louisa, for joining me. I love this because the one thing as the world is noticing when we do these things is we always have to remember is that life happens. And I love that we're doing these lives and I'm cracking up because it seems to be the time when family members love to reach out to me. And today I have two family members at the doctors at the same time. So I want to thank you for a little bit of patience with us today. But I'd love to welcome, as we're welcoming Louisa back, to thank you for joining us for I'm Possible Live and inclusive leadership. And Louisa has an amazing bio that you can check out in the comments. And delighted today. Thank you so much, Jackie, for joining us. How are you, Jackie? And let everybody know where you're from and what good introductions are for you as you're joining us so we can help you with some networking. And amazing Jackie, I'm delighted to have had the pleasure of working with on a wide variety of video projects. Talented and amazing woman who's helping me break out of my content creation skill. But enough about that. So today, Louise, I'd love to ask you as a first question for us today. I would really love to start talking to you and have an interactive discussion on which inclusive leadership characteristics and skills are vital.
You want me to talk about characteristics of inclusive leaders?
Yes, characteristics of inclusive leaders and skills. And I know it sounds like an interesting starting point, but Louisa and I were originally talking about doing this in a different order. And Jackie's reminding me, for those who don't have a working definition of inclusive leadership, I'd love for you to help us define it.
Okay. There are many characteristics. So I'm just going to highlight a few. Inclusive leaders are those that, they champion inclusivity in all aspects of the organization. So everything that happens in the organization is done with the inclusion lenses on, so to speak, from recruitment to retention to employee performance evaluation to resource distribution. Everything that happens in the organizations is done from an inclusion perspective. Inclusive leaders, they adapt their leadership style to meet the needs of diverse employees and clients. We're all different. We all have different needs. So inclusive leaders, take a look at that and adapt their style. They also create safe spaces where employees feel empowered to speak up without the fear of being penalized. They prevent silos in the organization. In other words, They facilitate team interaction. They're very quick to address inappropriate behaviors. In other words, in offensive jokes, hurtful comments. So they address that right away, but they do it in a way that invites a dialogue. They run their organization with really a laser sharp focus. They're acutely aware of what's happening in their environment, and they intervene whenever needed. For example, take a staff meeting. They know, they sense, they are aware of who's interrupting whom, who has the floor more often, who is sitting at the margins. And they take steps at addressing that. They are very good at what's this technique is the PAN, and it was introduced to me by Kathy O'Bear, who's a social justice educator. And inclusive leaders, in my view, they're very good. They're always panning the room. PAN stands for pay attention now. They know what's happening and they address it. They also demonstrate a great deal of empathy. In other words, they take others into consideration. They show concern, they inquire, they ask questions. They know about the challenges employees are facing. They listen very effectively.
That's
Now,
amazing. Louisa, one thing you mentioned margins. What do you mean about margins? I mean, for those of us who are occasionally, and I thank Jackie for being here, for those of us who are graphically challenged or have
mhm,
issues in terms of, defining frameworks, what do you mean the margins?
what I'm saying, imagine a staff meeting where are individuals sitting. There are some individuals that come and sit right front, front and center. Others are always on the back or on the sidelines. Why is this happening? And is it always the same individuals? So you need to pay attention to these dynamics.
I love that. I love that. And really, I love that Pam. Really good reminder to pay attention now. I think it's so important, especially in our fragile world. I laugh too because it's part of preparing for our talk today. And I love it that you're really helping us frame the inclusivity lens. What I laugh is whenever we're picking topics for lives, it seems like that's the week that everybody's posting content on that. So I've seen so much leadership content. Really, really grateful. Have to following a couple of new leadership pages and enjoying some quotes from the mental fitness positive intelligence community. I'm delighted to be
Mhm.
involved with. Why?
Now,
Yes,
now,
Louisa.
I just would like to add something. Now from the framework of a global leader, they need all that, but they also need more. They 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 need to recognize and embrace differences. They also need to ensure their team members understand and recognize and respect differences. Because what's happening is many misunderstandings, many miscommunications that occur in a global environment are due to ignorance of cultural differences rather than rejection of those differences. Inclusive global leaders, they never project their culture onto others. For example, my management style may be I'm a hands-off leader. Here's the bus, you drive the bus, you know where to get where you need to get it, so to speak. This style does not apply to all groups, so I need to be cognizant of that so that I and adapt my approach. I think to finalize this, global leaders, they're bridge builders. They bridge cultural differences in the workplace, and they see situations from multiple perspectives, not only mine but everybody else's. They're curious about differences, and nimble enough to think globally, but also act locally if the need arises.
I think one of the important things that you said, and you reminded me too of our discussion previously about cultural insights, is that
Hmm.
in terms of inclusivity, it really depends whether we are a local leader, a regional leader,
Hmm.
a volunteer leader, meaning somebody maybe asked you to become a leader when it wasn't something that was uh, of your nature necessarily. You didn't always raise your hand. And I think that's a really great thing, or whether it's global. So I think the reminder that there's different types of leadership, are really, really, really important. And I also want to thank Cheryl for popping in and joining us and saying hi. And one of the things that's really hard, I think, also is that as we're talking about different types of leaders, is it really is important to figure out the lens through which you're you're approaching it. And I think I'm so glad Louisa's here to tell us that. Louisa, the characteristics part of inclusive leaders, regardless of where they are when they're leading, or regardless of the size of communities that they lead, or whether it's inside of a workplace or inside of an organization, are there any other characteristics of inclusive leaders that we should really think of?
Well, I think there are many, many parts, as I mentioned. And I would say, um, leading with empathy, knowing where your employees, your teammates, where individuals are coming from. I think that's a very important characteristics, because it's not just mine. It's not just my perspective. That no longer applies to a multicultural organization. So I need to recognize different perspectives and respect that, and make sure they're included in everything that happens in the organization.
Another comment, and thanks, Jen. Oh my gosh, mental fitness, positive intelligence, community in the house. Thank you so much. And I love that. Starting with curiosity is paramount for inclusive leadership.
Absolutely, I agree 100%.
Wow. Because we have to think of where we're coming from. And it's
Hmm.
the same point whether you know someone's background. What I loved was I was having a first meeting with a potential group of pod members. And it's interesting because Yen and I apologize if I butchered your name. I need you to help me practice and get the most amazing, wonderful woman from Dubai. And it's funny when we meet each other and we're exploring, we started with curiosity about each other, and we weren't really sure whether there was going to be a leader within the group. We just wanted a starting place for the discussion. But I love starting with curiosity. It's reminded me also of Jeffrey Davis, who I adore following for many reasons, because he mentions a lot of work on curiosity and on wonder and on, trying to tap into our young genius in those, conversations. And I think that's crucial towards figuring out a beginning.
Yes, absolutely. Because for some individuals, sometimes differences are scary, so they stay away from those differences. But being curious is looking at differences, looking at diversity with a different set of lenses, and wanting to understand a different perspective. That means you're able to bring everybody to the table and allow everybody to participate.
It is, and that's another thing. Who is necessarily sitting around the table is maybe a part also, I think, of a characteristics of an inclusive leader. Who you invite to sit with you, who you invite into the process, whether it's of planning or discovery or exploration. I remember being on committees in an organization, and each committee you're looking for somebody to bring a different flavor. But I think the reminder, start somewhere. Start somewhere with a natural curiosity, with an interest in other Louisa and I had talked about this before. It's beyond human to human. We really need to have a natural, inherent curiosity and really show up and care. If not for each other's opinions, for the perspectives, for the seats we hold, for the views we bring in there. It's reminding me of a cool conversation our family members had this week as we were talking about situations where you may not always feel welcome and you may not always feel invited. But I think it is that reminder to welcome others to the table or to have a seat or invite them into a conversation, because some aren't natural leaders. You know, that first time I remember being invited into leadership or putting in an application to our local Leadership Orange program. And I was grateful that other friends were filling out the application too, but I didn't have a definition of leadership. And
Mhm.
was reminded of that in a recent interview. We need to see leaders who look like us, who can help us expand our styles, whether they're engagement, learning styles, communication styles, active listening styles. I think all of that really would help us as we're exploring, which ways to go. I'm really delighted, Louisa, you're joining us today, and I'm really looking forward to our next possible topic. As we're closing out today, what should we leave? What should we leave others with, Louisa?
Well, I'd like to leave them maybe with some strategies for creating an inclusive organization. Again, there are many, many steps that you can take. From a leadership perspective, I think first and foremost, you need a commitment. I think this is essential. You need to to commit yourself and the organization to create an inclusive space for all. Because if the leadership is not committed, inclusion initiatives often fail because other priorities would take precedence. So, in addition to being committed, you really need to communicate the benefits of inclusion. You need to get everyone involved, and so that they understand why is this important, why you are taking the efforts to create an inclusive organization. So you commit, you communicate, and then you set expectations. I think that's another. And it has to be another priority because uh, everybody has, individuals have to understand that inclusion may start at the top, but everyone in the organization plays a role in creating an inclusive organization for all. Everyone needs to feel empowered to act inclusively. In inclusive organizations, I find many times that hiring the hiring process is done differently. You hire for culture add and not necessarily for culture fit. In other words, um, competing for top talent is far more than simply hiring the most capable individual. The individuals you bring in, I brought in to support the organization's growth, to help the organization become, reach, increasingly diverse markets. They help shape the organization as opposed to simply come in and fit in. I think in inclusive organizations, cultural competence is really seen as essential, as an essential skill set for everybody in the organization, because these individuals understand differences, but they also able to adjust their behavior accordingly. For example, take an interview. If I'm a part of a hiring committee, the usual mindset is I expect the individuals to come in and brag about themselves and share about their accomplishments. That is a typical US mindset, and it doesn't apply to other groups. So I need to recognize difference in mindset and adjust and make the necessary adjustments. That means I often advise my clients, you need to be nimble enough and you need to adjust your questions. Instead of asking your candidates, to showcase what they have done, maybe you shift that and ask them to showcase what they have done as part of a team. I also, there's something else very, very important is, you know, they use, inclusive leaders, they use data strategically. There is this notion that, there's this fear of data, because fear data may sometimes highlight problems or that are happening, but we need to start looking at data as an opportunity to grow, an opportunity to do better. And for that to happen, we need to collect data to measure progress, but in a meaningful way. So in other words, it's far more than simply counting the number of women or the number of blacks. In other words, it's more than reaching numerical benchmarks. The inclusive leaders approach data collection with the concept of intersectionality in mind. And this was a concept that was introduced by Kimberly Crenshaw. Because when you think about it, no one is just a woman, just a black, just Muslim, just a mother, just a CEO. We are a sum of our multiple identities, and we need to keep that in mind. So a more meaningful way to measure progress is look at who's advancing in the organization. Is there a difference in gender, in ethnicity, nationality, in function? Does the demographic profile of the employees reflect the profile of the organization's customers or suppliers? How are employees experiencing the organization? Is there a difference based in gender or ethnicity or rank? How are they living? Who's leaving the organization?
You're reminding me also underneath it, and as we're closing out, is really as we're thinking about it, besides thinking of all these great food for thoughts that Louisa's leaving us with, is we need to think of it as part of a succession plan.
Oh,
It's
absolutely.
it's part of a legacy, as in the culture you're trying to create, the culture you're trying to grow, culture you're trying to feed and nourish, but also what do you want to leave for others, and how
Mhm.
are others able to carry it on and honor it. Louisa, I cannot thank you enough for joining us today and bringing us more gems. And if you have a chance to look up Louisa's our earlier live on cultural insights to get more of Louisa's gems. But Louisa, and those of you joining us live or for replays, I want to thank you so much for joining us today, and to welcome you if you're joining us for the first time. Please come check us out on other Mondays at 2, or stop in and check out one of our lives. But we really want to thank you so much. And I adore this. You're giving us the great spirit. It's really the reminder that inclusive organizations hire for culture and not necessarily culture fit, multiplying rather than diluting. And if we could just leave with some of that great energy as we're closing out today, I absolutely love that. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Louisa, for returning.
You're
Thanks, everybody else,
welcome.
for popping in. And I hope you stay safe, stay well, stay inspired, stay in touch. And I hope you have a magnificent day. Take good care.
Bye
Thanks.
for now, everyone.
Bye bye.